Standing Rock was the largest indigenous resistance of our time in occupation, and I was already out in North Dakota working on another project, and when I heard about what was going on, I said, drop me off over there the day that we wrapped, and I dropped off, and I got dropped off there, and I ended up running into some relatives and some friends that were already there, so I just kind of fell right into camp, and I had my camera and my laptop with me, so I just started shooting some little videos, and Sundance and the Redford Center had reached out to me and asked if I knew what was going on out of Standing Rock, and I was like, yeah, I'm actually here right now. And they said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just shooting some little clips and trying to get the message out and spread awareness. So they said, show me the clips. So I showed them to them, and then they said, do you want us to blast these across our networks? And I was like, yeah. And they did, and we got millions of views overnight. And then a little time went by, and then they slowly asked me if I wanted to do a documentary out there. And I said no at first because I wanted to keep doing the little clips. I knew if I was locked down to a documentary, I wouldn't be able to release clips, any of the footage. And so after a couple weeks went by, I started seeing like all these non-native filmmakers come there. There was like at least 50 non-native filmmakers. There was cameras everywhere. And I just started to realize that there was a pretty big responsibility to tell our story from our perspective, because everybody was there to tell the story. And that was sort of Sundance and the Redford Center's thing too. They wanted to make sure there was at least one crew on the ground that was a native crew and telling it from the inside perspective. And so when I finally came to the conclusion that perhaps the movie that comes out a year and a half later will be just as important or more important than those little clips that I would release. I was out of camp with these folks over here. Kanahus was one of the first native filmmakers, the other native filmmakers that I had met out there, and immediately once we started hanging out, we started looking at each other's work, and we kind of sort of were supporting each other. I would like give her some footage, she would give me some footage. If some cats was messing with me because of the light color of my skin, she'd be like, no, hell no, he's cool, he's actually native, you know what I'm saying? And so she was definitely an ally for me on the ground, and she was embedded out there, Kanahus was, and she contributed a lot of footage to the film.
One of the things that I feel like that it wasn't all this conflict and mayhem, like people will witness that it was actually a sense of freedom, of what freedom really is in this country and in this land that has been colonized by, the European race. And when you bring that much Native people together from hundreds of indigenous nations, it's powerful. It's powerful beyond words, because some of these nations are warring nations in the past. Some of these nations have never even had no political ties or anything before. But what happened there was bringing hundreds of tribes together for one reason, and that's to protect our water, that's to defend our indigenous territories and our rights to our land and our rights to make the decisions about our territories. And that was one collective message that we all stood on there on the ground.
I think it's important to note the militarization of the police and how they tested a lot of weapons on us. And like Hanahu said, there was hundreds of nations that got together, and that really scared them. It scared the federal government. It scared the state of North Dakota. And when you bring together that much power, we were unarmed and nonviolent. That's something we stressed, because there were women and children there were elders there. And if something happened to the point where we did become armed, they would just wipe us out. I mean, they were shooting us with non-lethals at point blank range. At that point it becomes lethal. I have friends that are maimed, that lost their eyes, that had lost a finger. So it's important to note like the militarization of the police and how far they're going to go just to stop a non-violent movement.
I'm actually reside up in my traditional territory, which is in British Columbia, Canada, Secwepemc territory, and we're dealing with a 1,000-kilometer pipeline right now. Half of it is proposed to go through our territory, so the battle is going to be right there in my homelands, and it already is. We're building 10 tiny houses as a campaign, Tiny House Warriors. Our land is our home. to build 10 tiny houses to block the Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. I think this collective consciousness right now that has awoken because of Standing Rock, people are going to really start supporting Indigenous people. And this film that's going to be coming is going to be a real shock and awe for the world. And I think that there's going to be massive support that's going to come out of this film, and that's what we hope for, because it will really help people embody and how we feel as Indigenous people, what our lives, what we go through because of colonization and oppression and genocide, because the forceful removal of Indigenous peoples from their homelands is a form of genocide, and that's what American and Canadian government is executing right now. It's not a thing of the past, and this will wake people up to that.
Right now, the destruction of our earth is happening as we sit here. There are movements right now, like Bears Ears National Monument down in southern Utah. Trump just shrunk that land size and opened it up for drilling. The Arctic Wildlife Refuge is open for oil exploration too. Line 3 in Minnesota and Wisconsin is being built right now. It's happening. It's still happening. And until it hits you personally, you don't know. Like the American public doesn't know. We know because we come from these indigenous communities where uranium is in our water. We know what it's like to have cancer. We know what it's like to suffer and watch our people die at the hands of extraction. But until it hits you personally, then you won't know. And I don't want it to come to that point, because then it's too late.
What drives me is the spirit of Crazy Horse, the spirit of all of our warriors and war leaders, the top warriors that went out to battle. That's what drives me. Knowing our past, of how hard our people have struggled to maintain so we can even be here today. And then you look into the future, to our water, to our children, to our salmon, and looking what the future holds if we allow oil extraction, pipelines, mining, all of these things to come in our territory. We don't have a future. That's what drives me, is that as an individual, we all could stand up and make a difference.
What drives me is our Wakayanja, our sacred little ones. I don't have any kids myself personally, and I'm scared to have kids. Looking at the future, but they're so innocent in when they're small. They're so innocent, so sacred. They didn't ask to be here, but the least we could do for our future generations is make sure that they have a chance to live. And that's what our ancestors did when they were forced on these concentration camps, these reservations. They looked ahead and they said, I want my people to live, so I'm going to suffer right now for them to make sure we live. So I just want to suffer as much as I can for them so they don't have to.